Ronnie and Reggie Kray, the East End twins who have become the most notorious gangsters in recent British history. In 1969, they were jailed for life for 2 premeditated murders. But the Krays were only the latest in a long line of gangland bosses. For the previous 20 years, London's underworld had been dominated by 3 men: Billy Hill, Albert Dimes, and Jack Spot.
My name is Jack Spot, and they used to call me the governor. But all I did was to defend the Jews.
Whitechapel, East London. Since the turn of the century, home to thousands of Jewish refugees from Eastern Europe. They were easy prey to local English thugs, but the sons of the refugees did not stand idly by. One of them was Jack Comer, better known as Jack Spot.
I was always on the spot where Jews were being sorted out. You never knew that? That's why they called me Jack Spot. Everybody in the lane had a nickname.
Born near Petticoat Lane, Jack Spot grew up in the heart of the Jewish East End. It was a tough life.
I was fighting every minute because they used to hate Jews like poison. A tailor they wouldn't pay for a suit. You order a suit and they'd come there, they wouldn't pay. They went away racing, they had bets with Jewish bookmakers and never paid. You understand what I mean? When they lost, they wouldn't pay no money.
So what did you do for these tailors or for any other East End shopkeepers?
Well, I used to stand there. Once I was there, they paid for everything.
Spot became a sort of hero to Jews for his street battles with anti-Semites. In 1936, he was singled out by Oswald Mosley for leading a violent attack on Mosley's black shirts as they marched through the East End. But by this time, Spot was combining community protection with protection rackets. He had become a gangster.
Spot relied, indeed, upon muscle and, of course, the menace, which was, the grimace and the half sneer on his face, which in any sort of dim light could be very, very frightening, and you could well understand that somebody running a cafe or a restaurant or something else when confronted by this man who loomed closer and closer to you, his face shaking and his eyes in slip, would indeed be very, very frightening.
Spot's menace was reinforced by the razor.
My brother learned to be a barber. It took a very long time. And whenever I come by, I used to hide it and lock up the razors. I used to take razors from him. Holograms. A hologram is a wide-fitting razor. A French razor is a thin blade. I knew all them.
Everybody carried a razor, or a stiletto, or whatever. I used to carry a flip knife.
So I had to use a razor sometimes, because they never come one-handed, always a mob. So when he quick, bomb, 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 and they used to run for their lives, it's up the arse around here, but I made sure not to cut them on the jugular vein.
Why not?
Once you cut in the jugular vein, finished.
So you didn't want to finish them?
Of course not. I don't head up for murder, do I?
It's a question of letting people know that you had it. If you had it, you wasn't interfered with. If you didn't have it, you couldn't walk in the West End. Everybody would, it's nothing. Never carries a tool.
I got a fellow once looking to shoot me. What was his name? And I said, you looking with me? He said, yes. And as he pulled the louver out, I'll give him a cut round here. The Scenic Railway. You bastards. I was never afraid.
Very often, villains were slashed with razors or knives and finished up in Charing Cross Hospital, mostly Charing Cross Hospital, where we always approached them, and they always gave us some spurious answer that they'd fallen down or cut themselves, and that there was no action to be taken. But in one particular case, the man said that he was convinced that it was Spot. And I went to interview Spot, and he put on this rather menacing act without, in fact, assaulting me personally. He nevertheless leered with his hooded eyes, said, who said it, do you think you are? This was his sort of attitude.
Spot's big racket was protecting illegal gambling clubs. In the late 1940s, this earned him thousands of pounds a week and social respect.
And Jack Spot epitomised all that there was about the old-time mafia-style gangster. He was always immaculately dressed. He always looked the part. He would come out of his flat every morning, go over to the station and go into the barber's and sit in the chair whilst they did his hair and gave him a shave and so on. And then in his brown suit and a brown overcoat and a brown fedora hat, he would march down Edgware Road and receive the accolades of people that said, "Hello, Jack, how are you, Jack?" and so on, because he knew everybody. And then he would walk down to the Cumberland and into the Cumberland in a place they called the Bear Garden, and there he would sit very discreetly at a table near to the wall, and then he would receive people in much the way that Don Corleone did.
But Spot had his eyes on another gambling racket, protecting bookmakers at England's richest racecourses. Before World War II, criminals from London's Italian community, led by Darby Sabini, controlled racecourse protection.
They used to go round there with two sticks of chalk and a sponge. Well, not a bucket. They would get your sponge, bookmaker sponge, dip it in the bucket, so he's got a wet sponge, give him 2 pieces of chalk, because in those days they used to work off the joints, and every one of them had to give a donation. They had to throw $1 or half a quid or whatever into the bucket. So at the end of the day, all the bookmakers all round the track, whether it be Epsom or whatever, right, Ascot, whatever, well, the bucket would be full of money, and that was it. There was numerous fights, and there was people, razors, fights, and boshes and coshes and all that in those days, because whoever was the strongest kept the income. I mean, they kept the that particular thing. The weak at the Swallery.
Sabini set up the original Bookmakers Protection Association, but during the war he was interned with other Anglo-Italians. Their absence from the tracks allowed other mobs to take over, until finally Jack Spot muscled in.
Sandown, Epsom, all the modern tracks. At Epsom, I controlled Epsom. I had to go with bookmakers, Jewish bookmakers, and stand by the bag, because they were being robbed non-stop. And if anybody had a bet with them, they wouldn't pay. But if they won, they won the money.
Now the main protector of both the racing rackets and big city gambling, Spot found himself courted by an ambitious thief who'd spent many years in jail, Billy Hill.
He was an out-and-out thief, and a good thief. Very, very good thief. He had a reputation for being a very, very good safe blower, which I know he'd learnt all from the biggest safe blower in England at the time was a Birmingham man that had already married Bill's sister.
There was one occasion where he broke into a jeweller's, and a fat old policeman on the beat stood there, and down the stairs came Billy Hill, carrying the safe, which must have weighed a colossal amount, and he did all this by what he termed dynamic tension. And he carried this down, and the old policeman said, "Hello, hello, hello," because they did say things like that. And Billy Hill dropped it, but of course dropped the safe, but there was no way out.
Billy Hill was a small-time operator, you understand? And when he came out of prison, he knew that I was running clubs and all that, so he cried to me that he wanted to. So I said, okay, so I took him to my tailor, made him a suit and all that.
Illy then saw that he didn't have to go out thieving and risking his liberty. All he had to do was be with Spot, open up a couple of joints in Soho, have the spills, like the big dice games and card games there, and he was getting even more out of what he was getting out screwing without risking his liberty. So he was sitting in a lovely position.
In league with Spot, Hill now moved in on any West End gambling club he fancied, using the muscle of Sonny Sullivan and his brother Slip.
we just walk into the club, say, you ain't, Bill would do the talking. He was very calm, very polite. He'd be so polite until he was upset. And he was very, very polite, and he'd say, you ain't doing too well here, are you? Well, we could make this a lot better, you know. We'll be in here. We'll come in and we'll make the play. And we had half the club then.
From being a thief, now he's a gangster. He sees himself as a Lucky Luciano now, right? So anyway, they opened up one or two spielers in Soho, and all the good thieves of the day, all the top thieves of the day, they used to go to this spiel. It was regular. Everybody went there. I went there. Everybody went there. They used to play the night away gambling. You play like dice, good big games of rummy or kaluki, but big money because they had packets of money because they were all out thieving. Now they're all what you call good money getters. In other words, they could be like skint today but have 30, 40, 50 grand in their pocket the next day.
By now, Hill himself was setting up the most audacious robberies of all. In 1952, a team of his stole more than £200,000 from a post office van. No one was charged, the money was never recovered, and each robber was £15,000 richer. One promptly lost the lot in a crooked game run by Hill. In revenge, he tried to rob Hill's safe, but was caught red-handed.
He accused me, rightly, of trying to take his money. So I said, that's right. He said, you're a friend of mine. Don't you think you're taking a liberty? I said, Bill, you've been taking liberties all your life. I said, how about the money you've taken off me in these crooked games? I said, what I was going to, it was 60-odd thousand pounds at this particular night. I said, what that money was is only a fraction of what you nicked off from me in these crooked games.
Hill was now making so much money and had so large a gang on his payroll that he decided he didn't need Jack Spot anymore. Their alliance fell apart when Spot finally realized what was going on.
And behind my back, he's planning my life away. What a bastard, eh? He tell everybody he's a yid. You don't want no yid to be a governor.
He wrote a book, didn't he? King of the Underworld, Boss of London's Underworld or something like that. And to counteract it, at the same time, within a month, Spot's come out with a book, King of the Underworld or something. Now, they both want to be seen as number one. Egoists, you see, nutters, right?
While Hill plotted Spot's downfall in Clubland, Spot had to face a separate challenge from Alberto Di Meo, better known in the underworld as Albert Dimes, the leader of a rising generation of Anglo-Italians.
Albert took me under his wings, and me and Albert were like brothers. We went together everywhere. Every day we was together. We used to go to the West End, and we had a couple of clubs of our own, and we used to go racing, making a book at the races, and we had one or two spielers clubs, and we got a living. And once we went into the ice cream business together, me and Albert.
It was at the races that Albert Dimes chose to take on Jack Spot. One day, Dimes refused to pay protection money to Spot's aging lieutenant, Moishe Blueball, who was collecting from bookmakers on the track.
Moishe Blueball said, well, Jack said, meaning Jack Spot, Jack said it's so-and-so as from now on. He said, I don't give what Jack said. You're not getting no what's name off me. And that's it. Now, Moishe Blueball, now, see, it's a challenge, doesn't he? He goes back and tells Spot, I got the money off everybody else, but Albert said Jack.
Spot was furious, especially when he heard tales that Dimes had been bad-mouthing him on the racetracks and in the West End. In August 1955, he went to Soho to confront Dimes.
I've been hearing stories about what he's going to do to me and all this, you see. And I go to Frith Street, and there he is standing in Frith Street by a fruit shop. I walk over and hit him on the chin. He runs away and goes into the fruit shop. I went in there, And then he took a knife to try and cut me. You understand? There was 2 knives supposed to be used, but only one was used that he had. I had no knife.
If Spot said Albert had a tool, that's all rubbish. Because no way would Spot have left the West End, at the East End, and made his way to Albert to have a confrontation with Albert without something in his hand, whether it be a knuckle duster or whether it be a tool or anything, right? So he brought the tool along, right? And he's gone at Albert with the tool. Steamed into Albert with the tool.
In the shop, Dimes had some help from the fruiterer's wife.
The fruiterer's wife hit me on the head with the scales. Smashed my head open with all the weights. I didn't know what it was all about. What did she have to do that for?
The woman in the fruit shop probably saved Dimes' life and delivered him a famous victory. Both men were put on trial for the Battle of Frith Street, but both got off. It was the beginning of the end for Spot and the making of Dimes.
He was nothing, Albert Dimes. He pounced on that victory. And Billy all leapt him up and says, "Oh, he done Jack and all this crap." Which he never done me. I was about the next day looking for him again, you know.
For all his bravado, Spot was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. In the heart of London's old Italian community, the friends of Albert Dimes plotted revenge for Spot's attack.
Now we do what we got to do. Whatever Spot had interest in went up in the air. He had clubs in the West End. They were smashed up, burnt down, whatever. Right? We went into all these joints in the East End looking for Jack Spot. Right? 1 or 2 people got hurt. Individuals got hurt. Now, Spot saw the writing on the wall. He knew now that the strength that he had wasn't forthcoming. Right? Iliad fell out with him. So now he realised, aye, what's happened? I'm out in the cold here, right? So now he's an individual. He's nothing, right?
In the end, Spot was betrayed by one of his own people.
Well, we had somebody in the Spot camp because all we wanted to know was where we could cop for Spot. That's all we wanted to know. And we had somebody who Spot thought he could trust that was in there alongside the Spot that would tell us when Spot left his house.
Night after night, Dimes's friends waited in the Central Club for news of Spot. Bert Rossi claims he got so bored he went dog racing. But meantime, his comrades had gone off to attack Spot as he left a restaurant with his wife.
They start cutting me here. You understand? They cut me from here, down here. They cut my ear, you see, on the floor, which I picked up later and put in my pocket. They cut me, stabbed me in my... If I showed you, I've got scars all over me. You understand? And I survived. 300 stitches they give me.
Well, when you're doing a man, you don't care whether you kill him or not, no, do you? You're not... If you were just going to hurt a man, you just slice him, and that's the end of the story. But if you want to keep going to work, then you do want to kill him, don't you? That's what you want to do. He brought all this on himself, Spot. He didn't have to have done nothing done to him. He thought he was going to be Jack the Head, or as he put in the paper, King of London's underworld, and he brought it on himself. He wanted to be a king. Well, he did. That's it. If he hadn't have attacked Albert, it wouldn't have happened. End of story. Right?
The mob attack made front-page news. Spot's wife, Rita, became a heroine for allegedly fighting off his attackers. Soon the police arrested the obvious suspects, but Bert Rossi had fled to Ireland with Billy Bly, who was one of Spot's attackers. Weeks later, Scotland Yard detectives, acting on a tip-off, dragged them back.
Now, they put me in a cell here, and they put Bly in a cell there. Right? Right. All of a sudden, I hear a shuffle of steps in the corridor. They open up the cell door. Listen to this. But What? They talk about the Gestapo. Listen to this. The SS. They turn, this is in Paddington Green, out of London. They open up the door, and there's a bird standing there. I've never seen it before in my life. This Spot's old woman, standing there with a couple of coppers around her. She looks at me. I don't even know what she's there for, right? Looks at me. She said, yes, that's the man. Before I knew anything else, they couldn't even say, what are you talking about? The door's shut, and they done the same thing to Bill. That was our ID. In a cell, on my own, that's the man. Right? Because I tell you, from the very beginning, she never saw a soul. Even though she was there when it happened, she never saw anybody, because the people, I tell you, the people that went on that thing there were masked up.
Rossi and 4 other men were put on trial. Spot was hauled in to exhibit his scars, but refused to give evidence.
He excused himself that he couldn't see anything because he was being seen to. But the thing is, his wife gets in the box. Oh, yes, yes. She points at me, Bly, and Dennis. She said, yes, those 3 were there. I actually saw them do this and do this and do that. Now, you can't say to the judge, this is one lot of rubbish, because everybody that did, well, they had a mask, can you? So, they take her word for it.
On Rita Spot's word, Rossi was convicted and jailed for 4 years. Other men were jailed for 7. But with Jack Spot out of the action, Albert Dimes was now top of the pile. Who should start snuggling up to him but Billy Hill?
Billy was a cunning manipulator of men. Illy was a bad man, Illy, and I worked with Illy. But he had no feeling, Illy. He wasn't a warm-hearted man. Illy was a man that would use anybody, use you, and just drop you. He had no feeling. I don't know what very, very unusual man, Illy. Anyway, now I could see it. So he started coming to Central Club. Now he's palling up with Albert. See? But he was there too often for my life. I thought myself, well, it's funny now. He's never been in here. He's always with Spot. All of a sudden, now Spot's hit the dust. He's here every night, you know.
The alliance between Dimes and Hill meant there was no way back for Spot. In the early 1950s, he'd been collecting £3,000 a week from one gambling club alone. But in 1959, he was declared bankrupt. All down, he says, to Billy Hill.
He meant to skin me, murder me, and kill me, but it only worked. He got me no money. He's a wicked bastard.
He succeeded in destroying you.
He destroyed me, not bodily. He destroyed me that he left me a bit broke. But thank God I had a good wife and my lovely children. I'm all right today.
With Spot out of the game, in the 1960s, Albert Dimes was the most respected gangster in London. But at the height of his power, he died.
I was choked. Like a brother. I was choked. He was a good, lovely man. Yeah, choked. Died of cancer.
That left Billy Hill. He had that rarest of gangsters' fates, a happy and prosperous retirement. But not before he had embraced 2 rising young East Enders, Ronald and Reginald Cray, who would make the era of Hill and Spot look tame.
Next week in Gangsters, an interview with the chief henchman of the firm, the criminal organisation run by the Cray twins.